We got to see Ben Stark. Honestly, his match went pretty easily for him. He had a pretty good draw in the second game, and in the first draw, his opponent stumbled heavily on mana. We know he thinks that his Izzet deck is kind of in the middle of the field, but we also had a chance to pop in on some of our other side tables, including Richard Tan. And Richard was the one with that insanely fast Boros draw to finish off Luis Salvato. He is seated across from Ben Stark and is sure to give him a handful of damage here as his deck looks good. We got a chance to look at the rest of the deck list, and it's nice.
It is the ideal Boros deck,
yes,
I would say.
Super good Boros deck, and he's seated across from Ben Stark. The players are ready and seated. Let's head out. It's time for round number 2 here from Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. Hello and welcome back to coverage here at Pro Tour Guilds of Ravnica. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with Paul Cheon. We're here in Atlanta, Georgia. It is time for round number 2. In our feature match area, we got a chance to see this man briefly. That's Richard Tan. He's playing for Team Omega Card Games, and he's 1-0 so far with this draft deck. It is a super nice Boros beatdown deck. He has brought some punching power to the table, no doubt about that. Across from him, though, Ben Stark, the Hall of Famer for Team Channel Fireball. And Ben, he won his first round fairly easily, though it was in some ways due, at least in the first game, to his opponent stumbling on mana significantly. Ben is on Izzet, and it's not exactly a blockbuster deck.
No, he was not especially happy with the deck. He does have a bunch of Electromancers and some nice top-end spells where he can fully utilize the cost reduction, but he's also playing triple Devious Cover-Up, which is not something you're too thrilled about playing. And you know, especially against a Boros deck, you might struggle. But looks like Richard Tan missed land drop number 3 here.
Has no white mana available, so Fresh Face Recruit is the only attacker on the battlefield, and this may give Ben Stark the time he needs to assemble his removal suite. Now, the card that I'm thinking about, number 1 in this matchup for Ben Stark, and he's got 2 copies of it, is Beacon Bolt.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That is kind of the saving grace for his deck, because of the fact that he has double Beacon Bolt. I mean, Beacon Bolt is one of the premier removal spells in the format, and if he can muster a way and find one of these Beacon Bolts, he can compete with some of the best decks out there.
Especially this one, right? Because he only needs to get, and by the way, there it is. Beacon Bolt is going to get into the graveyard via Night Veil Sprite, but of course, Jumpstart will allow him to cast that again at some point and maybe kill something even small like a Healer's Hawk or like this Fresh Face Recruit you see on the battlefield here.
Yeah, and Richard Tan did find land number 3, so we will have a game. He did stumble for a turn, but Ben Stark also didn't have a play on turn 3. Could be holding a Whisper Agent here.
And there it is. Whisper Agent hits the battlefield now for Ben after the Blade Instructor lands for Richard Tan. This is Richard's 3rd Pro Tour start. He played at Pro Tour Fate Reforged as his debut. That was in 2015. And he finished okay, 144th. That's in the top half of the field. Not bad for your first PT. He does have a Grand Prix top 8 on his resume as well.
Yeah, and Richard Tan missing that 1 land drop is going to be very, very big here, because now the tempo is in Ben Stark's favor, and he's got a lot of different options here. He's got that Beacon Bolt in the graveyard, so if he does discard a spell to the Beacon Bolt, he can actually remove one of the 1 toughness creatures that Richard Tan has in play, but chooses not to.
Goblin Electromancer hits the battlefield now for Stark, threatening perhaps to trade off for the Blade Instructor.
And taking a look at Ben's hand here, he does have a Disdainful Stroke up, but Richard Tan, not a lot of expensive cards in his deck, very streamlined Boros deck, but we did see a couple of those True Fire Captains in play in round 1.
Yeah, unfortunately for Ben Stark here, Richard did use 4 mana this turn. It was just on 2 different cards.
Right.
But yeah, double True Fire Captain, certainly a fine target for a Disdainful Stroke. Though Devious Cover-Up, as you mentioned before, a little bit clunky. Though at this point, Ben has the mana for it. He may want to hang on to a card like that.
Yep.
Ooh, Chemister's Insight in hand for Stark, though. That is one of the key cards for his deck. It's actually one of his more powerful spells as it turns on the Beacon Bolts. It also gets cast for cheaper thanks to the the Electromancer that he has on the battlefield, and can help keep him ahead on cards over the red-white deck, which, you know, doesn't have the ability to get back ahead on cards. It kind of needs to work within the constraints of its draw step every turn, and well, that's one of the downsides to it. What you get for that is this. Look at all these cheap threats, and they're all quite good, too.
Ideally, for Ben's side, Richard Tan plays a 4-mana spell, so Ben Stark can Disdainful Stroke and play Chemister's Insight this turn.
And look at this. Ben very willing to trade off board state for damage here as he trades off his Nightveil Sprite.
Right. At this point, you know, with the Chemister's Insight, he's going to be able to cast it and then also jumpstart it later. You know, he's not really too worried about just card filtering, and that the Scout can just continue to grow with, you know, some of the mentor cards that Richard Tan has.
The interesting thing here, though, is that he actually played 10th District Guard post-combat. He could have played it on the Scout pre-attacked and made it into a 2/2, but he chose not to.
Right, right. That, I mean, it's possible that he might have wanted to represent some kind of trick, but yes, that is really interesting because he could have. I think number one, he just didn't really expect Ben to block with the Nightveil.
He might be just happy with that trade, right? He might have said, you know, if you'll let me do this, I'll do it. Although, as you find out when you play Magic and the longer you play, you realize at some point that when your opponent does something, it's even if you thought you wanted it, it's not good for you.
You don't necessarily want to just give them that option. Yeah,
that's right. But I can understand that, too, from Richard's perspective, because the Nightveil Sprite is, well, it's a much better creature than the Scout.
Yeah, definitely.
By the way, there is Chemister's Insight being jump-started now from Ben, and he is well and truly ahead on cards now. Yeah, board state-wise, they're at a bit of a stall.
But Ben does have that Beacon Bolt in his graveyard. And keep in mind, Beacon Bolt also counts cards that have been exiled. So it will, in fact, count that Chemister's Insight that has been jump-started and exiled when counting how much damage it would deal.
Richard, in a bit of a holding pattern here, starting to use his Legion Guildmage to tap down some of the potential blockers on the other side of the battlefield. I wouldn't be surprised if the Fresh-Faced Recruit starts getting in the red zone at some point as well, as Ben really doesn't have great blocks. He'd have to throw 2 creatures in front of it, which could be risky.
And if you take a look at Ben right now, he does have that Beacon Bolt, but you know, one of the issues that we kind of foresaw during the draft was Ben is a little bit short on spells. He didn't really find the radical ideas that he was looking for. So right now, that Beacon Bolt really, I mean, it can only deal 1 damage if he discards a card. So he's still
good thing for him. There's 2 different threats that he can.
Yeah, right. But at the same time, I think he's still waiting to find another spell so that he can get that Legion Guildmage off the battlefield.
You know what's funny? He did. It's another Beacon Bolt.
Oh, yeah, that works.
Does that work for you?
Yes. Now he has just 2 additional removal spells sitting in his graveyard, and he's up a lot of cards because of that Chemister's Insight, too.
Richard Tan showing a lot of patience here, not even attacking with the Fresh-Faced Recruit, which, you know, Ben could double block, but could put in an interesting position.
Yeah.
Take a look at Richard here.
Choosing to be very patient here, maybe waiting to see if he draws a combat trick to be able to attack. He probably have some of those because he also has that Blade Instructor on the battlefield.
A lot of lands on the battlefield now for Ben as well. He has pulled significantly ahead on cards thanks to Chemister's Insight, but you know, if they're all lands, it doesn't really help them. It doesn't really hurt that much. And as it turns out, yeah, his hand is a little light on action. He's just got 3 counter spells in hand with another 2 lands. So he's flooding out slightly here, but he does have the board state at least at a position that's tenable for him. And Richard Tan drew another Legion Guildmage this turn. He'll probably run it out and probably just get countered.
Yeah. There's a couple options. Remember, Ben Stark does have double Beacon Bolt in graveyard. So if he feels like the Beacon Bolts are good enough, he might not use a counter magic. But, you know...
So wait, something weird just happened. So... Let's see, why did Ben play? Okay, cool. It all worked out. So that was Hammer Dropper that went on the stack there for Richard, and Disdainful Stroke's going to take care of that, leaving Ben Stark with 2 copies of Devious Cover-Up and Unconditional Counter.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be tough for Richard to resolve anything relevant over the course of this game.
And it looks like Ben now wants to start getting aggressive here. He's got a couple of counter magic backup as well.
These extra lands got to go for something, so... Bang, bang, get rid of those.
And I think he's just going to attack with everything, and he has that cover-up, so...
Yeah, this is looking really good for Ben Stark. A great turn to kind of turn things around. He gets in for still a full 5 damage after the trade, but I'll tell you what, if your Boros opponent is blocking to trade just to keep their life total up, you're thrilled.
Oh, yeah, you're in a really, really good spot.
He has
here.
no creatures.
And look, you really just got to see the true power of that Beacon Bolt. It basically just acts as a double removal spell.
Against this deck, it does.
Yeah.
And that is going to be the first Devious cover-up to counter that Legion Guildmage that Richard had drawn last turn.
Yeah, and he's choosing to shuffle 3 of his creatures, 2 Whisper Agents, and a Night Veil Sprite back into his deck.
The Guildmage, I think, gets exiled. Okay.
That is true, Ben.
Yes.
Devious cover-up does exile whatever it counters rather than having to go to the graveyard. He mentioned, I don't think it's going to matter particularly, and he's right.
Yeah, against Boros, not so much, but against decks, Golgari decks, and even other Jumpstart cards, that exile effect is very relevant.
Again, Richard Tan taking a very defensive stance here, using Luminous Bonds on the 3/2 Whisper Agent, and we're going to see the other copy of Devious cover-up to counter the True Fire Captain as it goes on the stack here from Richard. So,
and here's the loop.
Yeah, Ben Stark now shuffling back in another Devious cover-up. He also shuffled in his action spells from before, a Whisper Agent, that kind of thing.
And at this point, Ben Stark has access to so much mana that he is happy just continuing to shuffle Devious cover-ups back in.
Whisper Agent number 2. And he kept the card on top. It looks like it was Electrostatic Field. Said, sure, why not? And there's another True Fire Captain, so Richard Tan kind of drawing some heat here. Back-to-back True Fire Captains, and he's managed to stick one as well.
Yeah, Ben still has an attack here with the Whisper Agent. Richard Tan
kind of has to block.
Probably just has to block, and then that opens the window for the Electromancer to start getting in. Oh, okay, he takes it.
That's risky business. Land off the top for Richard. He's got Cosmotronic Wave, which looks just absolutely miserable at this juncture. Of course, the downside to playing cards like that is that when you're behind, they rarely do anything. And that's the situation that he finds himself in. Command the Storm to kill. That is enough to get the job done. And Ben Stark nicely transitions to the control route there, leverages the power of, well, the card that we mentioned right off the bat, Beacon Bolt. He ended up finding both copies in his deck and using those to manage the board of Richard Tan. From there, it was child's play, and he has won game number 1.
Yeah, he just got way too far ahead on cards. The combination of Chemister's Insight plus the double Beacon Bolts, it just meant that, you know, as long as you're not just completely behind on board, you are just going to just bury your opponents in card advantage.
That's right, and that's exactly what happened there. So game number 1 goes to Ben Stark. We'll see if Richard Tan can fight his way back with his Boros deck here in game number 2. We'll be back with that right after these messages.
Looking for a place to hang out and play Magic? Head to your local game store this and every Friday to play Friday Night Magic events. Get more info at magic.wizards.com/FNM.
Hello, welcome back to the feature match area here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm with Paul Cheon. Thanks so much for coming along for coverage of Booster Draft. We're doing a little thing. We're doing a thing here, Paul. We're watching Ben Stark, one of the best players at Limited and, frankly, just at Magic in general in the world. And we watched him draft. We watched him play round 1. We're now watching him play round 2. And we're going to watch him play round 3 as well. We're going to get the full story of this draft from beginning to end and kind of weave it all together. Even if he loses, even if he wins. I like this. I just like the idea of going a little extra deep on this, because one thing about the difference between watching Constructed and watching Draft is that with Constructed, you can get a feel for how a deck plays out, or maybe it's a deck that you play, and when it pops up, you already know. But in a Booster Draft, we just kind of come in on it, and we have to try to get you up to speed as quickly as we can, but it can be hard to kind of relate to the deck. Here, we know the strengths and weaknesses of Ben's deck. We've been talking about it since he drafted it. We talked to him about it. Then we talked about it in round 1 and now round 2. We know the type of cards that he needs to see. And I think that just gives a lot more context for Limited, which, of course, is kind of my favorite.
Yeah, definitely trying this new thing. And I remember talking to Ben yesterday and asking, hey, so, it might be a little weird, though, if you're 0-2, and then he just immediately responds with, I'm not going to be 0-2. Come on. This is draft we're talking about. I was like, I don't know, man, 10%. And he's like, math. Don't worry about it.
And he was, of course, right.
Yeah, well, the odds were in his favor.
Indeed, indeed. We were standing there having a chat, and Eric Froelich came up. And Eric said he hadn't had a chance to draft this format a whole lot yet, but he thought his deck was okay. And he ended up showing it to us, and it was... it basically had all the cards that Ben hoped to open
okay.
in his Is It deck.
So Ben's dream deck.
Basically, and Ben was kind of scolding him a little, like, dude, your deck's insane. And to be fair to Eric, he was like, I don't actually know. He was like, really? And he's like, yes, it's insane. And I can tell you.
Ben has been really able to maximize on the Electromancers and just like
seriously
what he drafted. And keep in mind too, he's also drawn some of his better cards too, right? We're talking about the Beacon Bolts and the Chemisters Insights. Those are kind of the best cards in his deck.
All right, we're underway here in game number 2. A good 2-drop to kick things off for Richard, though it is interesting how these things play out, because while Legion Guildmage is often one of your better 2-drops, it's actually not the best on turn 2. You'd oftentimes just prefer something like any of the other 2s, honestly, because this is one that you don't actually want to risk in combat. In here, Richard Tan plays it clean. He attacks into the electrostatic field because it's free. And Ben says, I'm going to block you, which is exactly what happened. And then Wojek Bodyguard is a follow-up, and that is a big play here from Richard Tan because Ben Stark cannot combat this.
Yeah, I mean, Wojek Bodyguard is one of the premier aggressive commons in the set. I mean, you look at this, and it's a 3-mana 3/3, but it's going to put a counter on this Legion Guildmage. We're talking about 4 power and 4 toughness worth of stats from a red common here. Yeah,
and this is interesting because Ben says, hold on a second. I want these triggers to go on the stack because I have a reply. He has brought in Dazzling Lights out of his sideboard here, and he's going to use it on the Wojek Bodyguard, which means that it will no longer mentor onto the Guildmage, and that means that Ben will take 0 damage here if he chooses to block.
And he can now try to trade the Goblin Electromancer with the Legion Guildmage, and Richard Tan needs to have a combat trick here to be able to keep his Legion Guildmage alive.
Wow, this is a big swing for Stark.
Yeah. And he does have it.
There's a Sure Strike. So Sure Strike for Richard Tan. Wow, that was a really interesting sequence. He could have also Sure Struck his Wojek Bodyguard to get back up to Mentor. I guess Ben probably would have waited.
Yeah, but he wanted to get that Electromancer off the board because that pre-block Dazzling Lights tells Richard that Ben is going to look to trade that Goblin Electromancer with that Legion Guildmage.
Yeah, but I mean, if he gets the Mentor trigger, then it can't, right?
Right. This is.
By the way, there's your buddy, Healer's Hawk. It's not Trusty Rusty.
Right. But not quite. But what is?
But really, what is? And I'll tell you what, that card's not in this format. So Healer's Hawk it is, and bang, it gets a counter on it right away. And you see now the raw power from the Guildmage. This is where it really shines, where you can use it in the mid to late game to start tapping down creatures, and then use it to finish off your opponent after you've punched through for some damage. And that's what he's going to do. He's going to use it to tap down the electrostatic field before the turn gets passed back to him. Another benefit of the Guild Mage in this case is that, you often don't want to draw that many lands with a deck like the one that Richard has, but it gives you something to do with that extra mana.
Yeah, one of the issues with the Boros deck, it has the ability to kind of have these really explosive draws, is it doesn't quite have access to the mana sinks, and you don't have that much flood protection. Because you're looking to play a bunch of cards like Healer's Hawks and 1-drops, and you want to come out the gates, but you don't have kind of the late game options that Golgari or Dimir have. So a card like Legion Guildmage is even more important for this archetype, as it does give you something to do in the late game.
By the way, when I think about sort of a super big picture look on how these Boros decks go, when I see that I've gotten one counter on one of my creatures from Mentor, I'm pretty happy. And the second one, I just assume I'm going to win the game most of the time. And that's what's happened here for Richard. That Healer's Hawk is now a massive problem.
3/3 life linker with flying.
It's huge. And remember, now we have the Legion Guildmage that can start just taking away Ben Stark's life total in chunks of 3 without even needing combat.
Right.
And at a 9, Ben Stark is effectively dead on board here unless he can get rid of one of these creatures or gain life, and he's going to scoop him up.
Yep.
So just to clarify here, that's the Healer's Hawk knocks him down to 6. He, on end step, he says Legion Guildmage you down to 3. Untap Legion Guildmage you. Game's over.
Right. He has multiple ways to kill Ben because he, again, can also attack with that Healer's Hawk.
That's right. So that was a quick and decisive game number 2 going to Richard Tan. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not that surprised.
Yeah.
Because that was an absolute beatdown. All right, looks like we're going to head to our back table, and we're going to check out Martin Dang, who's playing against Guillaume Wafotapa. So Guillaume showed up here for this Pro Tour. It's always good to see him, the Hall of Famer from France.
What do you think he's playing in Standard?
I think he's playing Jeskai.
Yeah. I would guess that he's probably playing Teferi, Hero, Dominaria in his deck. That would be my guess.
That does seem like a very
Guillaume. Oh, look, he's got a blue deck in draft as well.
Hey, this looks nice, too. You see the Murmuring Mystic, one of the best cards you can get full stop in an Izzet deck.
Is that a Drowned Secrets? On the battlefield? That's not an enhanced surveillance, I don't think, on Martin Dang's side.
Where? Oh, no, yeah, you saw it. Yeah, you're right. That is a Drowned Secrets over on my... I was looking on Guillaume's side just out of instinct.
I was like, this must be a sideboarded game. This is probably 2 grindy control decks going at it.
You're right.
And, he's going for kind of the mill strategy here.
That's exactly the case, and we are in game number 2, Guillaume having picked up game number 1. And Martin Dang fighting the fight.
Well, so far I've only seen I only see premium cards on Wafotapa's side. There's a Murmuring Mystic and a Midnight Reaper with multiple Capture Spheres, and I see a Deadly Visit on top of his library. So he looks like it looks like the Wafotapa has a really nice control deck here.
By the way, Wafo, come on, man. The Celestia sleeves. Come on,
hey, to
man.
Be fair, Martin Dang has the Boros sleeves.
Yeah.
Full deception.
But Guillaume's never played Celestia deck in anything ever. That is just blatant lie. Wishcoin Crab hits the battlefield for Dang.
Oh, and look at that. That's a Niv Mizzet.
Oh, hello. He milled it away.
Yeah.
With the drown. Oh.
I guess he must just be straight 3 colors here. He must have a lot of gates in his deck. Because trying to play Niv Mizzet in a 3-color deck is pretty ambitious.
Oh, you're right. He has Deadly Visit in his graveyard and Niv Mizzet.
Just full Grixis.
Is it a stretch? Yeah. Wow. Martin Dang's going to breathe a sigh of relief to have dealt with Niv Mizzet. That's about the easiest way to do it right there. Can't be countered.
Right.
Demands a removal spell. They get a card off it when you do use a removal spell.
I mean, if there is a color to do it in, being blue, I mean, having a bunch of Surveil cards does help out a lot in terms of just being able to dig through and find the mana sources necessary to be able to cast cards like Niv Mizzet and even the Deadly Visit.
Looks like Wafotapa just cashed in that Midnight Reaper. Wants to find spells here to leverage the Murmuring Mystic.
I wouldn't be surprised if Wafotapa has some way to shuffle threats back into his library. Cards like Devious Cover-Up would be very strong in this matchup, along with possibly even Enhanced Surveillance if he does have a lot of Surveil effects in his deck.
Yeah, control players see a card like Enhanced Surveillance and they think that way. They think, I might need this. Yeah, even though, like you said, when an opponent plays Boros, you're like, wait, why did I put this in my deck at all?
And Martin Dang on the full mill him out strategy here with the Drowned Secrets. Every time he plays a blue spell, Guillaume Wafotapa has to put the top 2 cards of his library into his graveyard.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he's actually got that much headway on that, though, does he?
Yeah.
That's a pretty full library. All right, well, it looks like this one is going to be in a bit of a standoff for a while, and our main table is ready. So let's head back there. We'll keep you updated on this one as we go. But I want to see Richard Tan versus Ben Stark, game number 3. Both games convincing, one in either direction. You know, Richard really managed that second game nicely, and it wasn't really close. And in game number 1, well, we saw some pretty explosive stuff from Stark. So let's get underway here. It's time for game number 3. Healer's Hawk. He's got 3 of them in the deck. He's supposed to have it on turn 1 some percentage of the time, and he finally does. Turn 1 Healer's Hawk for Richard Tan. What's his follow-up play?
Maybe another Healer's Hawk?
Could be.
He probably has a 2-drop, but given that there's an Electromancer on the battlefield, you might just want to go to the skies. And Ben Stark, you know, he doesn't have that many ways to just play defense against a bunch of Healer's Hawks. He's got that one Nightveil sprite, but I don't know if he has a bunch of Mudrakes in his deck. Should
he just scoop?
I don't know. It's hard to race, right?
2 Healer's Hawks. How do you win?
You're relying on stuff like Sonic Assault to get in for damage here and there just to try to burn people out. But the Healer's Hawk is just kind of negating all that extra damage that Ben can do.
Okay, no land drop here from Richard, but he does have a solid 2. Though at this point, it feels like Ben Stark is going to be priced into trying to race, and as you mentioned, that's very difficult against, even just 2 power of lifelink every turn. Though the real problem comes in later, right? Yeah. When the Healer's Hawks pick up a counter or 2, and then the race becomes
untenable. I think I would have actually just considered blocking with the Guildmage here. You're stuck on lands. It's going to take a really long time before that Guildmage actually does anything relevant with the abilities.
It's a bear.
And Ben is just looking to race here. So
I'm with you on that, Paul. Right now, that Guildmage is just going to be a 2/2 for too long.
Right.
Though, that being said, you know, it is powerful and can have an impact later in the game if Richard is able to start finding his mana.
And now Richard has to be thinking, okay, so he attacked with both of those. I mean, Ben must have a Whisper Agent here to block this Legion Guildmage. Oh, no, of course, of course.
Super price-reduced Command the Storm is going to kill the Guildmage. Though it is interesting because, again, Ben, really looking at the sky at those Healer's Hawks, and he's going to have to find an answer for at least one of them. Look, one of them you can ignore. It just doesn't affect the board in enough of a way, but not Double Trouble and not with a Blade Instructor. So this better be a Beacon Bolt? No. But he could find one.
2 mana draw 2 is pretty good, and I think he did find one. I see a gold card, but it could be one of his 5 Electromancers.
It is Beacon Bolt. He's going to use it on the Blade Instructor.
That was really big.
Keep his dream alive. Yeah, that's right. Ben Stark trying to scrap out a win against Richard Tan here in game number 3 and put himself into the finals of this first draft pod. But Richard Tan, he brought the firepower. There's no doubt about that. This Boros deck has some explosive starts to it. I mean, Ben has to sit here and live in fear of cards like Tajik and just getting absolutely killed out of nowhere.
But just look at the mana that he's been able to get, the effective mana that he's been able to get with these Electromancers. He's saved 5 mana by having those 2 Electromancers in play with Chemist's Insight, Storm, and the Beacon.
Over the course of 2 turns. Yeah, that's insane. So that's a Goblin Banneret now for Richard Tan. That is one of the best friends of Healer's Hawk. Yeah, and it's going to cost him if he wants to. The play with the Banneret is to pay the 2 mana pre-combat because it has Mentor, and then put a trigger onto the stack to put one onto the...
Did Ben just draft... This just looks like a modern
Hawk.
Storm deck here.
It kind of does.
Got 4 Electromancers in play, Chemist's Insight for 1 mana. Oh, man.
Here's all the mana now, by the way. For Richard Tan, he does not attack with the Banneret, but that means that True Fire Captain has arrived, and things are starting to slip away from Ben Stark, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Stark does have the removal spell. He does have Beacon Bolt. For the True Fire Captain, he will take 3 damage as a result, but he still needs to find an answer to these pesky Healer's Hawks. Ben is going to be the person up on a lot of resources, but,
Does he just start Beacon Bolting them?
I don't know. I
Look at this. Chemist's Insight for 1 mana, and he discards another Electromancer.
I don't think you need a 5 mana discount on any spell, so this makes sense.
He had all 5. Yeah, I don't think he even has a spell that has 5 colorless.
Right. I don't remember Ben drafting a Cosmotronic Wave, but he could have had one. I mean, if he did, it would certainly be great here.
You mean if he drafted one?
If he drafted one,
yeah. I'll take a quick look here at the deck list and find out for you. No.
And one awesome thing that I see in Richard Tan's sideboard, because if you look at his deck, it is very vulnerable to Cosmotronic Wave. He's got 3 Mephitic Vapors in his sideboard.
Oh, he took all those from
every time he
everybody.
saw one of those, he's just like, nope, gonna take these. Thank you very much.
Smart. 3 mana is Dimir Informant. So
not gonna do it.
he's done a very good job of keeping the ground game relatively clogged up, but those Healer's Hawks are very threatening in the air if they pick up even a single counter. And Richard Tan,
This is a big turn for
looking
Richard Tan.
good.
He can pump the Boros Banneret, or the Goblin Banneret, and along with the True Fire Captain, he can then put out +1/+1 counter on both of his Healer's Hawks.
Yes.
And attack for a bunch, force trades. Even if the True Fire Captain dies, that'll still deal minimum 3 damage to Ben Stark on top of that. Oh, and he just has Cosmotronic Wave.
oh, he's got Cosmotronic Wave right now. Now we can pump up. So that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
That's
10,
11
11.
damage.
That's exactly
11.
lethal. And Ben Stark, he's going to lose in round number 2. Richard Tan is his match. Now, there is one card that I have in mind, though. Look at Ben's land count here. He's got 1 blue mana available, and a Dazzling Lights could save him.
Oh, right. Yes. But then how is he going to come back on the follow-up
Yeah, I mean, he's still in terrible shape, but he's dead right now if he doesn't have it.
Yeah. Oh, and he does have it.
Oh, look at this. He has the Dazzling Lights to give himself a shot.
So he's going to target the Banneret, probably, to prevent one of the Mentor triggers from happening, but he's still going to take 7 damage here. Go to 4.
Does look like it, and with that, with his removal largely being damage-based, the True Fire Captain's a major problem here as well, because he's going to have to enter combat with it or fire a burn spell at it at some point.
Yeah, he needs, like, Wall of Mist would be the perfect foil to that, but I don't think he has one of those. He does have an electrostatic field, but that's just going to be chump blocking.
Yeah, that's right, and he does not have a Wall of Mist either. So, you know, Capture Sphere is a card that comes to mind, but doesn't have that either. So this is a really tough spot for Ben Stark. He is able to keep himself alive thanks to Dazzling Lights, but you can see the look on his face is not the look of somebody who says, I found the way to win this game. He's looking at Devious Cover-Up, perhaps trying to see how much damage he can do on the crackback, but there's no way he's going to be able to get in for 18.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's a situation where he finds a Sonic Assault. Would that keep him alive and also allow him to race?
That's a good question.
You know, Sonic Assault on the True Fire Captain and the 2/2 Healer's Hawk might do it.
So Ben should be down to 4. Tan up to 18. Draw a card for the turn. Oh, it looks like he's down to 3, actually. He must have fired it at the True Fire Captain. 6 mana for City Watch Sphinx.
And that's going to be the game, right?
Well,
So
yes, because 1 Hawk will get through, and he has to put something in front. I guess he could go to 1.
He could put Dimir. Oh, right. He could put Dimir Informant.
Right.
But the thing is, he will be able to mentor onto the other Healer's Hawk.
That's right. So it's
then,
game.
yeah, Ben's going to take 2 from one of the Healer's Hawks, and then the True Fire Captain will deal at least 1 damage to Ben Stark if he chooses to chump block with the Dimir Informant.
Yeah, he's going to go ahead and make his Banneret a 5-power creature, pre-combat, attack with everything. Make sure he puts the counter on the other Healer's Hawk, and that's going to do it. Yeah, not good news on that one, Ben. And that's going to do it. Ben Stark loses to Richard Tan, and I'm not surprised at all because Richard's deck looks awesome. This Boros deck has performed really well on camera both times that we've seen it, and Richard just put himself into the finals of this draft pod.
Yeah, I mean, he's got kind of, again, the ideal Boros deck. He's got 4 1-drops, and they're all the premium ones, you know? When my Boros opponents play Hunted Witness, I'm like, all right, that's okay. But he's got 3 Healer's Hawks and the Goblin Banneret as his 1-drops, on top of just a very good curve with combat tricks, and then at the top end, Cosmotronic Wave with double True Fire Captain to finish people off.
Yeah, it looks really solid, and he had a very nice curve out there, culminating with that Cosmotronic Wave and able to push through the ground defenses of Ben Stark and get in for a bunch of damage. And the Healer's Hawk, by the way, that looks like we just had game over here. Was that Martin Dang winning?
I think Wafutapa actually took it down.
Oh, okay, Wafutapa win. Team Baguette there. He had Devious Cover-Up on loop. And, of course, each time
That's
he does
such a
this...
Wafutapa thing.
It is, exactly. He probably read that and thought, I'm in. But he was able to generate a lot of birds thanks to the Murmuring Mystics there and get the job done. So, great job to him as well. And they're falling fast in our feature match area. So, Richard Tan wins his. Ben Stark, well, we're going to watch him in his next round. He's going to be 1-1. And he's going to try to scrap it out and get a 2-1 out of his first draft deck. And I mean, that's just what happens sometimes at the Pro Tour, right? You're drafting against really good players. They draft well, they play well, and sometimes you just need to scrap it out and try to get a 2-1.
Yeah, and the format's really been fleshed out at this point in terms of it being out for a few weeks, and so everybody kind of understands how to draft. They've had the resources. You had plenty of time to prepare for this event. So if everybody just settles into the proper guild, everybody is just going to have a solid deck. And if you are one of those open guilds, I mean, Richard Tan looked like he got all of the goodies. And we saw Luis Salvato also with a fantastic Demeter deck. I think we've seen some of the better decks at the table so far.
Yeah, that's right. So, wow. Good stuff from the feature match area. Still very impressed by Richard Tan's Boros deck there. That seemed to be the one to beat, and I would not be surprised if by the end of the next round we hear that he has, in fact, won the draft pod. Yeah. That deck, it just looks like exactly what you want out of the Boros deck.
Yeah, going into the draft, after just watching Ben Stark and Luis Salvato's drafts, I was like saying, okay, well, you know what? Luis Salvato has an awesome deck. He's probably the 3-0 deck. And then I saw Richard Tan's deck, and I'm like, this is the deck that Luis kind of wants to avoid. Every time you have this deck that just curves beautifully into the late game, and if it goes to the late game, you can't lose. How do you lose? A very, very good Boros deck.
To Cosmotronic Wave.
Cosmotronic Waves and Healer's Hawks. Those Healer's Hawks gained him like 10 life over the course of that game.
They did, and they took an important avenue of victory away from Ben Stark. He was not able to even consider racing, given how much life they gained after that. All right, well, that is going to do it for our round 2 coverage here from the booth. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll have the third and final round with Ben Stark. We'll see you at that time.